In the main hall of the Yen family residence, wisps of agarwood incense wafted from the incense burner shaped like a golden beast, its sweet, cloying scent making one feel stifled. I stood quietly at the back of the hall, gazing at my birth mother, Lady Yen, who was seated at the head of the hall. She wore an embroidered satin jacket, and her well-preserved face bore a hint of nobility and scrutiny. Standing beside her was my biological older brother, Yen Zheng, who was now looking at me with a slight frown. "Now that you've been brought back, you must learn the rules from the beginning." Lady Yen picked up her teacup, brushed away the foam, and spoke in a dignified, steady voice. "Starting today, you will resume the Yen surname and be known as Yen Jiqiu. That crude, provincial name of yours, do not mention it again." In my past life, it was just this offhand remark that erased everything my adoptive mother, Qing Yunyang, had left me. At the time, I was overwhelmed by the attention and joyfully agreed, believing that as long as I was well-behaved and obedient, I could earn the love of my blood relatives. But what was the result? I poured my heart and soul into this grand mansion, I even gave my life for it. Yet as I lay on my deathbed, the only words echoing in my ears were my adoptive mother's earnest advice as she passed away: "Shaowen, you'll be on your own from now on, never let yourself suffer." The smoke from the agarwood incense stung my eyelashes. I lowered my gaze to hide the chill welling up in my eyes. Before I could say a word, Yen Wan, who was standing on the other side, suddenly dropped to her knees with a thud. Dressed in a simple, moon-white silk gown, her eyes red-rimmed, she looked like a white lotus swaying in the wind, utterly pitiful. "Mother, brother." Yen Wang choked out, tears streaming down her face like a broken string. "My elder sister has been wandering in exile for 16 years, enduring every kind of hardship. All of this should have fallen on Warner instead. Now that my elder sister has finally returned home, how could Warner dare to have the audacity to take everything that belongs to her?" She looked up at me with a guilty expression and pleaded earnestly through her tears, "Sister, I'll have the main courtyard cleared out right away. And the maids and servants who tend to the rooms, along with the marriage arrangement with the Zhou family, I'll return them all to you, sister. I only ask that you please don't hold it against me for taking your place." As soon as those words were spoken, the room fell silent. Lady Yan's grip on the teacup tightened suddenly, and a flash of heartache crossed her eyes. Yen Zheng, for his part, made no attempt to hide his concern. He hurried forward to help her up, but Lady Yen stubbornly pushed him away. "Warner, what are you doing?" Yen Zheng turned his head and looked at me with a furrowed brow, his gaze carrying an unmistakable warning and sense of pressure. "Jiqiu, Warner has grown up in this household for 16 years. She has a pure, kind, and sensitive heart. You've only just returned, and she's already willing to give you everything. As her older sister, you should show some generosity and not break her heart." That scene from my past life was exactly the same as this one. Back then, terrified of offending them, I waved my hands frantically and knelt on the ground, swearing I would never take anything that belonged to Yen Wan. I even volunteered to move into a secluded side courtyard. From then on, Yen Wan rightfully enjoyed the privileges of the legitimate daughter, while I became a mere shadow, living under someone else's roof. But in this lifetime, seeing Yen Zheng's smug, high-and-mighty expression as he tried to pressure me, I just found it utterly absurd and laughable. Instead of approaching her with the trembling fear they had expected to offer comfort, I looked calmly at Yen Wan, who was kneeling on the ground, and said quietly, "Since you feel guilty and wish to vacate the main courtyard, there's no need to wait for a convenient day, move out right now. As for the marriage arrangement with the Zhou family, if you wish to call it off, just bring me the document annulling the engagement, and I'll sign it immediately." As soon as those words were spoken, Yen Wan's sobbing stopped abruptly. She stared in astonishment, her eyes wide, as if she were looking at a monster. The set of arguments she had prepared to push back and counter got stuck in her throat, and she turned bright red as she struggled to speak. Mrs. Yen and Yen Jing were also taken aback. "How dare you?" Yen Jing was the first to react, seething with rage. "Warner has been putting up with you at every turn out of deep sisterly affection, and yet you actually dare to be so aggressive? Is this the kind of propriety you learned in the countryside, bullying the weak?" What you're saying, brother, makes no sense at all. I lifted my head, stood up straight, and looked directly into Yan Zhang's furious eyes. My younger sister said she felt guilty and wanted to return what rightfully belongs to me. I'm simply allowing her to follow her conscience. How is that being overbearing? Could it be that what she said just now was nothing more than an act, deliberately trying to win sympathy in front of our elders, when in reality she doesn't intend to give me a single thing? Yan Wan was struck right in the heart by my words. Her tears began to fall even more heavily, and she trembled all over, yet she couldn't bring herself to say a single word in response. Enough! Mrs. Yan slammed her teacup down on the table, sending tea splashing everywhere. The look in her eyes as she turned to me was filled with deep disappointment and disgust. With your sharp tongue and biting remarks, where is even a shred of the decorum expected of a lady of good family? Have you come here just to stir up trouble in this household the moment you walked through the door? Faced with my biological mother's rebuke, not a ripple stirred in my heart. Please calm down, madam. I did not address her as mother, but used a more formal, distant title instead. Then I lifted the hem of my skirt, knelt properly, and bowed deeply. The Yan family is of distinguished lineage and follows strict rules. As a commoner's daughter who grew up in the streets, I truly cannot grasp the intricacies of life in a grand mansion like this. I looked up, my voice clear and resolute, echoing throughout the main hall. I am deeply grateful to Madame Meng and young Master Yan for taking the trouble to find me today. However, the kindness of giving me life pales in comparison to the kindness of raising me. My adoptive mother, Qing Yunyang, raised me with great hardship and sacrifice, and on her deathbed, she entrusted the Wanxiang perfume shop and the old house in the backyard to me. As a daughter, I must never forget my roots. I looked straight into Mrs. Yan's astonished eyes and said, slowly and deliberately, so, I won't change my surname. I'll still be Lin Jiqiu. The hall fell instantly silent. You could hear a pin drop. In ancient times, acknowledging one's ancestral lineage but refusing to revert to one's original surname was tantamount to slapping an elder in the face. You disobedient daughter! Do you even know what you're saying? Mrs. Yan was so furious she was shaking all over. Even her finger was trembling slightly as she pointed at me. Yan Zhang's face turned ashen. He took a step forward and snapped angrily, Lin Jiqiu, don't be so ungrateful. The status of the Yan family's legitimate daughter is a blessing that countless people would give anything to have. Are you really willing to sacrifice the family's honor for a second-rate perfume shop and an outsider? To me, the mother who raised me for 16 years is no stranger. This run-of-the-mill perfume shop is the very foundation of my existence. I stood up and brushed the dust off my knees. I glanced down from above at Yan Wan, who was still kneeling on the ground, a hint of glee in her eyes. She probably thought that, after my outburst, I had completely fallen out of favor with the Yan family, and that she remained their one and only darling. If she wants it, then give it to her. I find these high walls of the Marquis' mansion, so steeped in scheming and hypocrisy, disgusting. Sister, there's no need to feel guilty. You may continue living in the main courtyard and keeping your maids. As for the Zhou family's marriage arrangements, I will have absolutely nothing to do with them. My tone was cold, as if I were bestowing a hand-me-down garment I had no use for. From now on, I'll continue to run my Wanxiang perfume shop. On the 1st and 15th of every month, I'll pay my respects to my mother myself. The Yan family's status is far too lofty for a country girl like me to aspire to, so I won't be a nuisance in your household any longer. With that, ignoring Mrs. Yan's stunned expression and Yan Zhang's furious shouts, I turned around and walked out of the hall without hesitation. The spring sunshine streamed through the doorframe and fell upon me, warming me. I took a deep breath of the flower-scented air, and that suffocating feeling from my past life, as if I were being crushed by a boulder, finally vanished without a trace. This time, I'll just be Lin Jiqiu, living only for myself. As I stepped out through the vermilion lacquered gate of the Yan family estate, a gentle early spring breeze brushed against my cheeks, blowing away every trace of that oppressive scent from my past life that had lingered at the tip of my nose. Walking through the bustling main street, I headed straight back to the Wanqiang incense shop in South City. This was the only place my adoptive mother, Qing Yun-young, had left for me to call home. The shop wasn't large. The front served as a storefront for selling incense, while the back was a small courtyard with an open-air patio, the very place where I had grown up. No sooner had I stepped over the threshold than Uncle Chin, the old shopkeeper, came to greet me, his face full of worry. He had clearly heard about the Yen family's efforts to bring me back, and hesitated as if he wanted to say something. "Miss, why have you come back so soon?" But as for the Yen family... Uncle Chin, the Yen family is the Yen family, and I am my own person. I interrupted him sharply, walked behind the counter, and yanked off the blue cloth covering the ledger. From now on, I only have this Wanqiang shop. Bring me the ledgers and inventory records from the past half year. I need to reconcile the accounts. Uncle Chin paused for a moment. Seeing that I looked stern and resolute, not as weak and easily intimidated as usual, he immediately straightened his back, nodded repeatedly in agreement, and brought over a thick stack of ledgers. I used to use an abacus, my fingertips darting across the beads. Amid the crisp sound of snap, crack, one bad debt after another unfolded before my eyes. For the past 2 years, while my adoptive mother lay gravely ill, no one was in charge of the shop. Not only did we lose a large number of regular customers, but we also accumulated a massive stockpile of outdated incense. The books even showed a deficit of nearly 100 taels of silver. In my previous life, I devoted myself entirely to the Yen family and had no time to tend to this place. In the end, this incense shop, which embodied my adoptive mother's life's work, was forced to close to settle the debt. Uncle Chin, go move that batch of damp benzoin and the substandard pollen that's not selling from the warehouse to the backyard. I closed the ledger and made a quick decision. Uncle Chin looked troubled. "Miss, that batch of fabric has a musty smell. If we sold it at a low price to some seedy brothel, we might still get a dozen or so taels of silver for it, but you're asking for..." "I'm not selling it. It'd be a waste to throw it away, but selling it would ruin my reputation." I rolled up my sleeves and headed straight for the backyard. I'm going to rearrange the incense. In the backyard, dozens of bamboo trays were laid out. I grabbed a handful of damp benzoin, held it to my nose, and took a light sniff. Although it was moldy, the rich, deep bass note within had not entirely faded. As long as I steamed it repeatedly with yellow wine to remove the mold, then blended it with cloves and ground agarwood, I could turn something rotten into something magical, creating the ancient formula my foster mother had once taught me: spring sleep incense. With spring drowsiness and autumn fatigue, many noble women in the capital suffer from insomnia. This spring sleep fragrance soothes the mind and promotes rest, making it the perfect remedy. I was bent over, pounding fragrant paste with a pestle and mortar, when a figure, cool yet somewhat carefree, blocked the sunlight overhead. Manager Lin Sure has a unique way of making incense, tinkering with a pile of moldy scraps as if they were treasures. Anyone who didn't know better would think the evening fragrance shop had switched to the junk business. I stopped what I was doing and looked up. The man who approached wore a stone blue brocade robe with subtle patterns. He stood tall and straight, with exceptionally handsome features, though his narrow, elongated eyes betrayed an unmistakable shrewdness and worldliness. It's Gu Ju, the young master of the Ipinjai pastry shop next door. Ipinjai was thriving, and Gu Ju took over the family business at a young age. He was known for being a shrewd businessman who weighed only the pros and cons of every decision, without regard for personal relationships. In my previous life, I didn't have much interaction with him. I only remember that he expanded his business into the imperial capital and was a formidable figure. Young Master Gu, since you aren't next door counting your money today, you must have some spare time to come to my rundown courtyard and watch the spectacle? I picked up a handkerchief to wipe my hands and met his gaze with neither humility nor arrogance. Gu Ju didn't stand on ceremony. He walked straight to the stone table in the courtyard and sat down, his slender fingers tapping lightly on the tabletop. I'm just a businessman, I never waste my time on pointless matters. I came here today to ask you, Manager Lin, how much silver are you asking for this Wanqiang shop? He leaned forward slightly and fixed me with a piercing gaze. You've just returned to the Yen family, so I suppose you no longer have any interest in this rundown shop. My Yiping Jai is about to expand, name your price, and since our two families have been neighbors for so many years, I'll definitely not lowball you. It turns out he had his eye on my storefront. Gu Xiaodong, you're well informed, but unfortunately, your plans have backfired. I walked over and sat down across from him, casually pushing a small pinch of spring slumber scented powder, which I just mixed, toward him. My surname isn't Yen, and I'll never sell this evening fragrance shop. Guju glanced at the seemingly insignificant pile of perfume powder, raised an eyebrow slightly, and chuckled softly. Manager Lin certainly has quite a temper. But in business, pride alone isn't enough. Your shop has been running at a loss year after year, surely you don't even have the capital to restock now, do you? Do you really think you can revive Wanqiang with this pile of moldy fabric? Shopkeeper Lin, facing reality and cutting your losses while you still can is what a wise person would do. Every word he spoke cut deep. There wasn't a trace of the gentle, chivalrous tact one might expect, yet they felt 100 times more genuine than the Yen family's hypocritical expressions of concern. This was the real business world, one that didn't believe in tears and valued only ability. Instead of getting angry, I smiled, raised my hand to light the incense burner on the table, and scooped a pinch of incense powder into it. Mr. Gu Xiaodong is right, in business, you really do have to face reality. Take Yiping Jai, for example. Although business is booming there, the new spring pastries they've released are too sweet. Eating too many of them leaves you feeling sick to your stomach. As a wisp of blue smoke rose gently into the air, a subtle, elegant, and serene herbal fragrance, almost imperceptible, instantly filled the courtyard. Unlike the cloying sweetness of ordinary floral scents, this fragrance carried a sense of tranquility that instantly calmed the mind. Gu Ju's originally nonchalant expression faltered slightly. As he inhaled the fragrance, a hint of unmistakable astonishment flashed across his eyes. I watched his reaction and continued, as the weather grows warmer, the appetites of the nobility and high officials tend to wane. If the patrons at Yipin's High can catch a whiff of my spring slumber fragrance while savoring their pastries, which not only cuts through the cloying sweetness but also soothes the mind and calms the spirit, don't you think, Mr. Gu, that your pastry sales might double? Gu Ju suppressed the trace of disdain in his eyes and took another look at me. As an extremely astute businessman, he naturally understood the intricacies involved. The musty benzoin had been skillfully stripped of its off flavors, leaving only the richest, most mellow undertone, a level of incense-making craftsmanship that was far beyond the reach of ordinary people. Manager Lin truly has a pair of skillful hands that can turn something ordinary into something extraordinary. The sarcasm that had been present in Gu Ju's tone had faded, replaced by a touch of curiosity and mutual respect. What is the name of this incense? Spring Sleep Fragrance. Specifically formulated to treat spring fatigue and restlessness, as well as sleepless nights. I looked at him and made my offer. If Mr. Gu Xiaodong doesn't believe me, he's welcome to take a box to Yiping Jai to try it out. If it helps retain customers, I won't sell this shop, but I'll consider striking a mutually beneficial deal with Yiping Jai. If it doesn't retain customers, I'll hand the shop over to you willingly. Gu looked at me intently. After a long moment, he suddenly let out a soft chuckle. The smile reached the depths of his eyes, dispelling some of the calculating air of a businessman. Now that's what I call a win-win situation. He stood up, brushed imaginary dust off his brocade robe, and looked at him with a bright gleam in his eyes. Then Gu, will wait and see. I hope Manager Lin's incense lives up to the bold claims you've made today. If it truly has miraculous effects, I'll come to your door first thing tomorrow morning to discuss this deal. Watching Gu Ju walk away with such decisiveness, I let out a long sigh of relief. If you want to gain a foothold in the capital, going it alone won't work. Gu Ju is a pure businessman who values profit and contracts above all else. He isn't burdened by the Yen family's lofty moral demands. When dealing with intelligent people, as long as your interests align, they become your most steadfast allies. Over the next 3 days, I worked day and night, enlisting Uncle Chen's help to process and refurbish all the substandard spices in the warehouse. After the first batch of spring slumber incense was ready, I packaged it in simple, elegant bamboo boxes and displayed it in the most prominent spot in the shop. Meanwhile, in a private room at Yipin's high next door, the spring slumber incense I had sent over was quietly lit. Within 3 days, the threshold of the Wanxiang shop had been worn down by a crowd of noble women and their maidservants who had been drawn there by the scent. Spring Sleep fragrance became an overnight sensation, not only turning unsold scrap into cold, hard cash but also winning back several major customers that the late fragrance shop had lost. In less than half a month, more than half of the deficit on the books had been covered. Just as the business was starting to pick up, members of the Yan family came calling. It was Yan Zhang's trusted servant who arrived, carrying several bolts of dazzling fabric. He strode into the shop with an air of arrogance, but as soon as he saw me, he put on a fake, insincere smile. "Miss, the eldest young master heard that your shop has recently come up with a new fragrance, so he specifically sent me to bring you a few bolts of the finest shoe brocade to make you some clothes." The servant pushed the fabric onto the counter as if it were some great favor. The eldest young master said that the Yan family owns 18 fabric stores and embroidery shops in the capital, and they're about to launch a new line of spring attire. If we could infuse the fabric with your spring slumber perfume, it's sure to be a huge hit. This is our family's business. The eldest young master has instructed you to supply 500 boxes of scented powder each month. As for the profits, the Yan family will take 90% and you'll keep 10% as a fee for your trouble, just to honor the bond between us siblings. 1%? And I still have to pay for 500 boxes? As I looked at the few bolts of shoe brocade on the counter, which looked luxurious but were actually outdated, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Yan Zhang's scheme was truly audacious. 500 boxes of spring sleep incense, the cost of processing the spices and labor alone would exceed that 10% profit margin. He wasn't here to discuss business at all. He was clearly using the pretext of family ties and kinship to blatantly bleed me dry. In a past life, they used the same line of reasoning to convince me to willingly give the secret recipes and inventory from my incense shop to the Yan family's shop for free, under the pretext of upholding the family's honor. I stayed up late making incense like a fool, eventually wearing my body down, and Wanxiang went completely out of business. Meanwhile, the Yan family made a fortune by exploiting my own flesh and blood, only to turn around and credit all the success to Yan Wan, who had merely been serving tea and running errands on the sidelines. Please convey this to young Master Yan. I pushed the few bolts of shoe brocade back to him, still in their original packaging, my gaze icy. The Wanxiang temple is too small to accommodate such a great Buddha as the Yan family. If you wish to use my incense to scent your fabrics, fine, but at market price, 2 liang of silver per box. No credit, and certainly no profit sharing. If you find that too expensive, the Yan family is free to seek someone else's services. The servant's forced smile froze on his face, and he raised his voice in disbelief. "Miss, have you lost your mind? This is your own older brother's business. Are you going to rip off even your own family?" One of the family? I felt as if I'd heard the biggest joke in the world. If young Master Yan truly considered me one of the family, he wouldn't have made such extortionate demands. Wanxiang is the legacy left by my foster mother. She is not some vassal the Yan family can exploit at will. "Uncle Chen, please show him out." Uncle Chen had been seething for quite some time, and upon hearing this, he immediately grabbed a broom and, with a flurry of swipes and shoves, chased the servant out of the shop. "You ungrateful wretch! The young master was doing you a favor by giving you a 10% cut, just wait until you're out of business." The servant hurled these threats from outside the door, cursing under his breath, then slunk away. I looked at the crowd outside the door, paying no heed to the Yan family's threats. Now that we've burned our bridges, I'll show them that even without the Yan family, I, Lin Jiqiu, can still run a thriving business right here in the capital. As he turned and entered the inner chamber, Gu Ju was already sitting leisurely in a grand armchair, a cup of tea in hand. He had witnessed every moment of the commotion that had just taken place. Manager Lin really has a temper, he won't take a single loss. He's even willing to turn down a business deal from his own older brother. Isn't he afraid the Yen family will sabotage him behind the scenes? Guju set down his teacup, crossed his long legs, and let a hint of undisguised admiration flicker in his narrow eyes. In business, it's all about exchanging goods for money. Even brothers should keep their accounts clear. I sat down across from him and got straight to the point. Rather than being bled dry by the Yen family, I'd much rather discuss a partnership with someone as level-headed as you, young Master Gu. With the Mid-Autumn Festival approaching, I have an idea. I wonder if you'd be interested? Guju's eyes lit up, and he sat up slightly straighter. I'd love to hear more about that. Although Yiping-Jai's mooncakes are made with high-quality ingredients, there are so many pastry shops in Beijing that it's not easy to stand out. I took out a sketch I'd drawn overnight and handed it to him. This is the Flower Moon Night collaborative gift box I designed. The gift box is divided into 2 layers. The top layer holds Yiping-Jai's newly released 4-flavor osmanthus chestnut mooncakes, while the bottom layer features my shop, Wanxiang's, newly crafted Gipo incense. This incense soothes the mind and clears the heart, making it ideal for burning while admiring the moon during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Savoring the mooncakes while inhaling the fragrance is the height of elegance. I paused for a moment and looked him straight in the eye. This kind of novel bundled sales scheme is unprecedented in the capital. As for profit sharing, after deducting our respective costs, we'll split it 50-50. Not only that, but Mr. Gu's family will also have to pay me an additional 50 taels as a consulting fee for this idea. Guju looked at the exquisite blueprint, and a look of amazement flashed across his eyes. He was a shrewd businessman, and he recognized the immense commercial value of it at a glance. Splitting it 50-50 is fair enough. But this 50 taels consulting fee. Guju looked at me with a half smile. Manager Lin sure knows how to rip people off. If Mr. Gu Xiaodong feels this isn't worth it, you're free to turn left as you walk out the door and seek a partnership with another incense shop. I picked up my teacup, making a gesture as if to bid him farewell, my tone firm. But I guarantee that, aside from Wanxiang, no other incense shop in the capital can blend a Gipo fragrance that perfectly complements the aroma of these 4-color mooncakes. Guju stared at me for a while, then suddenly burst into hearty laughter. Excellent! That's exactly what I wanted. He slammed his hand down on the table. 50 taels it is. Manager Lin's ingenuity is worth every tael. To be able to buy the exclusive rights to this brilliant idea for 50 taels, I, Gu, am the one who's come out ahead. Yiping-Jai will take this deal. In my 2 lifetimes, this is the first time someone has, not because of our blood ties, nor because I gave in, truly recognized my intelligence and worth, and been willing to pay me in cash for it. This feeling of being treated with equal respect was like a long-awaited downpour after a prolonged drought, filling my heart with an indescribable sense of relief. Over the next month, Gu Ju and I devoted ourselves entirely to preparing the Flower Moon Night gift set. From creating packaging prototypes to testing combinations of mooncakes and spices, we handled every detail ourselves. Gu Ju was an extremely pragmatic businessman. His suggestions for improvements were always spot on, and he never treated me with the slightest bit of condescension simply because I was a woman. Meanwhile, my rigorous approach to incense making caused him to set aside the arrogance often found in businesspeople and treat me with greater respect. On the eve of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Flower and Moon Night gift set went on sale simultaneously at Yiping-Jai and Wanxiang. Just as I had expected, this novel gift set, which combined culinary delights with refined elegance, instantly took the capital circle of aristocratic ladies by storm. In just 3 short days, the first batch of 3,000 sets was completely sold out. The threshold at Yiping-Jai was nearly worn down by the crowds, and the name Wanxiang became widely known as a result. Even noble women from the imperial court sent people to make purchases. On the day of the inventory, Gu Ju personally carried a heavy rosewood chest to Wanxiang. This is Manager Lin's share of the profits, plus 50 taels of silver as a creative fee, not a single one less. Gu Ju pushed the box toward me, his eyes and brows radiating sheer triumph. I opened the chest and looked at the snow-white silver neatly stacked inside. A quick count revealed there were well over 800 taels. In my previous life, I had poured my heart and soul into plugging the Yen family's financial holes, yet I had never seen this much money that was actually mine. It's been a pleasure working with you, Mr. Gu. I closed the box and looked up to meet his gaze. It's been a pleasure working with you, Manager Lin. Guju gave me a deep look, his eyes betraying a deeper emotion. Just as we were basking in the joy of our success, a sudden commotion erupted outside the shop. A luxurious carriage bearing the Yen family crest came to an abrupt stop in front of the shop. Yan Jing jumped out of the carriage, drenched in sweat, scrambled inside, and, in a complete departure from his usual arrogance, knelt before me with a thud. Chichio! My dear sister! You must save the Yen family this time. Yan Zhang's sudden kneeling startled both the shop assistants and Gu Ju, who happened to be there at the time. I sat behind the counter, coldly watching this eldest son, who had always been so aloof and arrogant, now cowering at my feet like a beaten dog. In my past life, he would only display this kind of hypocritical weakness when he needed me to bleed and sacrifice myself to plug the holes in the Yen family's finances. Young Master Yen, this is such a grand gesture. I, Jiqiu, am merely a merchant's daughter, I cannot possibly accept it. I did not stand up, but simply fiddled with the beads of the abacus in a cold, indifferent manner. Yan Zhang's face went pale, but he paid no heed to my sarcastic remarks and hurried forward on his knees. Jiqiu, are you still upset with me for how I treated you before? I know I was wrong. But this time, the Yen family is truly facing a catastrophe. If you don't step in, the Yen family's embroidery shop will be completely ruined. Standing nearby, Gu Ju interjected at just the right moment. What's this? Haven't the Yen family's business affairs always been managed by the eldest son and that brilliant, ice-cold second daughter? How did things come to this? His tone carried an undisguised hint of mockery. He couldn't stand the Yen family's hypocritical ways. Yan Jing turned ashen with anger, but he had no choice but to grit his teeth and recount the entire story from start to finish. It turns out that just as Gu Ju and I were busy launching our Mid-Autumn Festival gift sets, Yan Wan could no longer contain herself. Eager to establish a firm foothold in the Yen family and prove that she was better than me, a country girl, she secretly took over the Yen family's 3 largest embroidery shops behind Yan Zhang's back. In an attempt to steal the spotlight, she went on a massive shopping spree, buying up a large quantity of extremely expensive yet outdated yin brocade, hoping to produce a line of one-of-a-kind luxury autumn clothing before the Mid-Autumn Festival. The result was predictable. No one was interested in those old-fashioned designs, and she was left stuck with thousands of taels of silver worth of unsold merchandise. To make matters worse, in order to cover the cost of the Yenjin brocade, she was so brazen as to embezzle the deposit set aside by Minister Li's household for her dowry. Now that the Li family is demanding the dowry, she cannot produce the goods or return the money. Minister Li is furious and has threatened that if the items are not delivered or double the compensation paid within 3 days, he will seize the Yen family shop to settle the debt and have Yan Wan brought before the authorities to face legal proceedings. That's Minister Li, for heaven's sake. We in the Yen family are just merchants, we can't afford to offend him. Yan Jing was so distraught he was on the verge of tears. I've checked the books, the losses from those 3 shops, plus the compensation owed to the Li household, come to a full 1,500 taels of silver. All our current cash flow is tied up in another batch of raw silk. There's simply no way we can come up with that much cash. He jerked his head up and stared intently at the rosewood box I'd placed on the table. When he burst in just now, he must have seen all that gleaming silver. Chichio, your shop is doing so well right now, and you just made such a profit. Could you lend your older brother 1,500 taels to tide him over for now? Just think of it as helping Wanner, she just made a momentary mistake. After all, you're a descendant of the Yen family. You can't just stand by and watch the Yen family's century-old legacy go to ruin. Hearing these shameless remarks, delivered as if they were perfectly reasonable, I finally couldn't help but burst out laughing. I slowly stood up, walked around the counter, and approached Yan Zheng, looking down at him from above. Yan Zheng, have you really lost your mind in your panic? My voice was icy, devoid of any warmth. My last name is Lin, and this Wanxiang shop also bears the Lin name. Yan Wan, in her quest for glory, has made a mess of things. Why should my hard-earned money be used to cover it up? She misappropriated customer deposits to make up for the losses she caused. That's stupid. And after the truth came out, she hid like a turtle in its shell, forcing her own brother to come out and beg on his knees. That's malicious. You, the Yen family, have been pampering this foolish and malicious menace as if she were a treasure, and now that trouble has struck, you've suddenly remembered me, this country girl whom you cast aside like a worn-out shoe? In a past life, Yen Wan had also left the treasury in the red because she was too concerned about saving face. I was foolish back then. I fell for their sweet talk and not only handed over all my savings but even pawned the few pieces of jewelry my adoptive mother had left behind, just to barely smooth things over. But what was the result? After the Yen family weathered the crisis, Yen Wan remained the same noble, flawless second young lady, while I became, in their eyes, a small-minded, petty person who reeks of money and is only concerned with trivial gains. They spent my money, yet looked down on me for the way I earned it. How can you say that about Waner? Yen Jing, struck to the core, sprang to his feet, his eyes blazing with rage. She's just inexperienced, her intentions are good. Now that you've made it big, are you really going to be so cold-blooded and heartless as to stand by and watch your own sister die? My own sister? My mother carried me for 10 months and gave birth to only me. I cut him off without mercy. As for Yen Wan, she's nothing more than an adopted daughter who's taken someone else's place. She's broken the law, so the Ministry of Justice will handle her trial. She owes money, and your Yen family should pay it back even if it means selling your houses and land. If you think you're going to get a single coin from me to save her, you can forget it. Just then, the sound of hurried carriages and horses could be heard again from outside the door. Supported by several elderly maids, Lady Yen walked in, looking haggard. Following close behind her was Yen Wan, dressed in plain white and weeping so bitterly that her tears seemed to fall like rain on pear blossoms. Chichio, mother begs you. As soon as Lady Yen walked through the door, she tried to kneel before me, completely disregarding her dignity. Quick as a flash, I grabbed her arm to stop her from kneeling. There's no reason in the world for a mother to make her daughter kneel. She's trying to use filial piety to force me to comply. Madam, you flatter me. I couldn't possibly bear such a heavy burden. With a slight exertion of my wrist, I lifted her up, yet my expression remained completely unreadable. Sister, it's all Waner's fault, every single mistake. Seeing this, Yen Wan immediately threw herself at my feet, clinging tightly to my legs as she wept bitterly. Please, sister, save me. If I can't come up with the silver, Minister Li really will throw me in jail. I'm just a defenseless woman. If I end up in a place like that, I'd be better off dead. She tilted her head back, her pitiful face etched with despair, as if the mere hint of a no from me would make me the one responsible for driving her to her death. Guju watched coldly from the sidelines, tapping the folding fan in his hand gently against his palm, a mocking smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He didn't intervene, because he knew that, as I am now, I don't need anyone's help to handle this charade of moral blackmail. If you want to die, turn left when you go outside. The moat is very deep. I guarantee that if you jump in, you'll get your wish. I stared coldly at Yen Wan, yanked my leg free, and brushed off the hem of my skirt with disgust. Don't try to play the victim with me, I'm not falling for that. You, seeing how resolute I was, Lady Yen trembled with rage. Lin Shichio. Are you really going to stand by and let her die? What exactly will it take for you to hand over the silver? You want silver? Sure. After returning to the counter, I took a blank deed from the drawer, picked up a brush, and dipped it generously in ink. Let's talk business. 1,500 taels is no small sum. I looked up, my gaze as sharp as a knife as I fixed it on Yen Wan. I only lend money, I don't give it away. If you want this life-saving sum, put up the properties in your name as collateral. As soon as Yen Wan heard the words mortgage the property, her crying stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened in horror, as if she were looking at a stranger. You. You want my dowry shop? Her voice trembled, and she even forgot to keep up her act of feigned vulnerability. Years ago, to demonstrate her deep affection for her, Lady Yan transferred ownership of a two-story jewelry store in the busiest part of the city's southern district to Yan Wan's name on the occasion of her coming-of-age ceremony, as part of her future dowry. That was Yan Wan's only, and most valuable, trump card. It's not just mortgaging the shop, interest has to be factored in as well. Ignoring her terrified gaze, I let my pen dance across the paper as I swiftly scribbled the terms onto the contract: a loan of 1,500 taels, at 2 fin interest per month, for a term of 3 months. If the principal and interest are not repaid in full by the due date, that jewelry store shall become the property of Lin Jiqiu. 2% interest a month. That's practically usury. You're just trying to rip us off. Yan Jing shouted from the side, his eyes wide as copper bells. You won't sign? I put down my pen, pushed the contract toward them, and looked at them with a half-smile. If you won't sign, then get out. Secretary Li's deadline is only 3 days away. You're welcome to go ask at other money houses and see who dares to lend 1,500 taels at a critical moment like this to a bottomless pit of a man who's about to face a lawsuit. This is called taking advantage of a crisis, something they did to me countless times in my past life. Now, I'm simply returning the favor. Madame Yan was so furious she clutched her chest. Her finger trembled violently as she pointed at me. You ungrateful daughter. You're driving us to our doom. Watch your words, madam. It was Yan Wan who drove herself into a corner, and it was your boundless indulgence that pushed her there as well. I'm cleaning up the mess she made. I'm saving her. My gaze was icy, and I wouldn't back down an inch. Yan Wan collapsed to the ground, her face as pale as paper. She turned to look at Yan Zheng and Lady Yan, hoping to find a shred of protection from them. But Yan Jing looked away, and Lady Yan closed her eyes in despair. Faced with Minister Li's thunderous wrath and the impending ruin of the Yan family's reputation, they had no other choice. I'll sign. Yan Wan nearly ground her teeth to powder as she tremblingly forced those 2 words out. She staggered to her feet, walked over to the counter, and her hand trembled violently as she picked up the brush. On the IOU, with its black characters on white paper, she wrote her name and pressed a bright red fingerprint. Very well. I blew the ink dry on the promissory note and slammed the 1,500 taels silver bill down on the table. Take the silver and get out of my shop. Remember, if a single cash is missing in 3 months, I'll come straight here with this promissory note to repossess the shop. Yan Jing snatched up the banknote as if it were a lifeline, then, pulling the dazed Yan Wan along, fled Wanxiang as though their lives depended on it. Mrs. Yan gave me a long, deep look. Her eyes were filled with complex emotions, anger, disappointment, and perhaps even a hint of fear that she herself hadn't even noticed. But none of that matters anymore. Silence returned to the shop. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled a long, heavy breath. Shattering the massive boulder that had been weighing on my heart from my past life, that exhilarating feeling was even more intoxicating than earning 800 taels of silver. Manager Lin's decisive actions today have truly opened my eyes. Gu Ju, who had been standing on the sidelines the whole time, finally spoke up. He walked slowly up to the counter and fixed me with an intense gaze, a look that no longer held a businessman's calculating nature, but rather a pure, unabashed admiration and amazement. What's the matter? Do you think I'm too ruthless and heartless, Mr. Gu Xiaodong, that I've turned my back on my own family? I raised my teacup and asked, raising an eyebrow. No, Gu Ju shook his head, a sincere smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I just think that Manager Lin is decisive, clear-headed, and independent. She's truly a rare and extraordinary woman. All that hypocritical family loyalty and moral blackmail seem like nothing more than clownish antics in your presence. He suddenly stopped smiling, his expression turning unusually serious, and his deep eyes fixed on me. Lin Jiqiu, actually, I came here today not only to deliver the dividend, but also for something even more important. I paused for a moment and set down my teacup. What is it? Guju took a deep breath of the air still lingering with the faint scent, took half a step back, and solemnly bowed deeply to me. I, Gu, am but a humble man, yet I have long admired you, Manager Lin. As fellow merchants, we both know that the business world is like a battlefield, and one must have allies to fight alongside. I admire your intelligence and, even more, your integrity. If you, Manager Lin, will have me, I am willing to offer half the assets of Yupinsai as a dowry to ask for your hand in marriage. He looked up, and his eyes, which had always been shrewd, were now filled with sincerity and openness. Rest assured, I will never be like the Yen family and try to restrict you through family ties or marriage. If you marry me, this Wanxiang shop will still be yours. You can run it however you like. The accounts will be completely separate, and I will never interfere in the slightest. All I ask is that you, Lin Jiqiu, be my, Guju's, one and only wife for the rest of my life, and my most equal partner. I was stunned. Having lived 2 lifetimes, I've heard all kinds of sweet nothings and experienced heartbreaking betrayals. In my past life, that arranged marriage the Yen family forced upon me for their own gain ultimately became a death sentence. I had originally thought that in this life, I was destined to grow old alone, spending the rest of my days tending to this perfume shop. But now, there is a man who has cast aside societal prejudices and broken free from the shackles of male supremacy, extending an olive branch of partnership to me on a basis of absolute equality. He understands my ambition, respects my independence, and is even willing to sacrifice half his fortune to earn my trust. I stared intently at Guju and saw the unmistakable intensity and anticipation in his eyes. Aren't you afraid that I'm too wild for you to handle? I asked, half-jokingly, though my heart began to race uncontrollably. Guju smiled, a smug, defiant smile. Why would I need to hold back the woman I, Guju, have chosen? If you wish to spread your wings and soar, I will open up the skies for you. If you wish to make waves in this business world, I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you, and together we will embrace this brilliant future. At that moment, it was as if I saw my past life self, the one who had been trapped in a vast, secluded mansion and died in despair, finally being reborn anew in the sunlight of this life. All right, I heard my own clear and firm voice say. I accept this marriage proposal. Guju acted with remarkable speed. In less than 3 days, the betrothal gifts from Yiping Zhai, intended for the marriage of shopkeeper Wanxiang, were carried into the south market in a steady stream. A total of 68 palanquins carrying camphorwood chests tied with red silk completely blocked the narrow street in front of the Wanxiang gate. Guju, dressed in a crimson brocade robe and mounted on a tall, majestic horse, looked as though the arrogance and joy in his eyes were about to spill over. However, such a commotion naturally caught the attention of the Yen family. As soon as I stepped out the door, I saw the Yen family's carriage parked imposingly at the street corner. Mrs. Yen and Yanjing strode forward, stepping on footstools, followed by several stewards holding ledgers. They carried themselves with the air of authoritative elders. Young Master Gu, I'm afraid this isn't the proper way to propose marriage. Yanjing stepped forward, putting on the air of the Yen family's eldest son, and blocked Guju's horse with a forced smile. After all, Shichio is a member of the Yen family, so this betrothal gift should rightfully be carried through the gates of the Yen residence. By delivering it directly to her private shop like this, aren't you showing a lack of respect for our Yen family? Guju dismounted, unfolded his folding fan, and smiled with perfect composure. My brother-in-law, you are mistaken. Manager Lin made it clear from the start that she bears the surname Lin, and Wanxiang is her independent business. I am seeking to marry Wanxiang's owner, Lin Jiqiu, so naturally, this betrothal gift must be presented to Wanxiang. Mrs. Yan's expression darkened as she walked up to me, speaking with the authority of a mother. Jiqiu, you're being utterly reckless. Marriage is a matter of the utmost importance. How can you treat it so lightly? Since you're getting married, you, as a young woman, can no longer be seen in public managing the Wanxiang shop. Today, while the Gu family is here to propose, you must return the shop's deed and ledgers to the family. The Yen family will incorporate Wanxiang into our family's holdings as part of your dowry, and your eldest brother will personally oversee its management. This way, not only will you have the Yen family as your backing, but you'll also be able to hold your head high once you marry into the Gu family, and you won't be at the mercy of others. Those words sounded so noble and selfless, as if they were all for my own good. But when I looked at Lady Yan's face, which was full of scheming, I just found it utterly ridiculous. Hand the shop back over to the public? Let Yan Jing take charge of it? This isn't about backing me up at all, it's clearly because they see Wanxiang has become a cash cow, and they want to take advantage of the situation to legitimately swallow up the last of my life's work and funnel it into the Yen family's pockets. Madam, your schemes are so obvious they can be heard all the way across the street. I met her gaze without flinching, my voice clear and firm, each word ringing out with conviction. I, Lin Jiqiu, run my business on my own skill and wits, not on any backing from the Yen family. Wanxiang is the treasure my foster mother left me. Every plant and tree bears the Lin name. You want to incorporate it into the Yen family's holdings? Absolutely not. Yan Jing grew impatient. As a woman about to be married off, what good does it do you to protect this shop? If one day the Gu family turns their backs on you, you won't have a single thing to fall back on. Only the Yen family is your permanent safety net. My way out is the confidence I've earned on my own, not this family of yours that's always ready to bleed me dry. I took a step forward, my gaze sweeping sharply over Yan Jing and Mrs. Yan, and decided to make my point crystal clear. Today, young Master Gu is here, and so are the neighbors from South Market. I, Lin Jiqiu, acknowledge that Yen family blood runs through my veins. If the elderly couple of the Yen family should pass away from illness in the future, I will certainly provide the money needed to support them, fulfilling my duty as a blood relative. But I am a living, breathing person, not some accessory the Yen family can sacrifice or exploit at will. My shop, my money, and my life, I alone am in charge of them all. Anyone who dares to set their sights on my Wanxiang, I will make sure she loses everything she owns. These words rang out with such force that they seemed to pound against the bluestone pavers, causing Lady Yan and Yan Jing to turn pale and remain speechless for a long moment. They finally realized that this daughter of theirs was a truly tough nut to crack. She neither craved the affection they offered nor feared their threats or inducements. Gu Ju burst out laughing, stepped forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with me, and declared in a loud voice, "Did you hear that clearly, young Master Yan? My wife, Gu Ju's wife, doesn't need anyone to back her up, because the Gu family is her strongest ally. I, Gu Ju, will not meddle in Wanxiang's accounts in the slightest. Whatever business deals Manager Lin wishes to pursue, I, Gu Ju, will support him wholeheartedly." This announcement completely dashed the Yen family's last shred of hope. Lady Yan felt her vision go dark. Supported by Yan Jing, she climbed into the carriage, her face covered in dust, and hurriedly departed. 3 months later, my wedding to Gu Ju took place as scheduled. There was none of the superficial pomp of a lavish wedding procession, nor were we bound by any cumbersome formalities. On our wedding night, we sat facing each other. After drinking the ceremonial cup of wine, Gu Ju handed me half of the land deeds and his personal seal for Yiping Zhai, and I, in turn, gave him a 10% equity stake in Wanxiang. We are husband and wife, and, above all, the most compatible business partners. Since our marriage, I've been happier than ever before. Gu Ju kept his promise and never interfered with Wanxiang's business. In fact, when Yiping Zhai was expanding its market reach, he even took my spices with him to break into the Jiangnan market. In the spring of the following year, Wanxiang's second branch opened on East Street, the busiest thoroughfare in the capital, solidifying my status as the capital's leading spice merchant. Meanwhile, things were not going well for the Yan family. After Yan Wan was forced to sign that high-interest promissory note, the Yan family, in an effort to preserve their reputation, had no choice but to sell off several plots of farmland to barely cover Minister Li's debt. Yan Wan, for her part, lost all her privileges and was forced to shed her former pampered and hypocritical demeanor as a young lady of privilege. Day after day, she tended to the struggling embroidery shop, managing it with meticulous care and frugality. It took her 2 whole years, her hands roughened, her eyes bloodshot, before she finally placed the 1,500 taels of principal and interest, down to the last coin, on my counter. That day, as she looked at me, her eyes no longer held the jealousy and resentment of the past. Instead, they revealed a sense of weariness and clarity born of being beaten down by reality. One late night, Yanqing also came alone to the gate of Wanxiang and whispered, "I'm sorry," through the gate. I didn't open the door, because that belated apology had long since lost all meaning to me. Until the Qingming festival of the third year. A light drizzle was falling from the sky, and I was just about to head to the cemetery outside the city to pay my respects to my adoptive mother, Qing Yunyang. As soon as I stepped out of the shop, I saw a plain horse-drawn carriage parked outside the door. Lady Yan lifted the curtain and stepped down. She looked much older than she had 3 years ago. Her temples were streaked with gray, and she no longer possessed the haughty air of a noblewoman she once had. She was carrying a lunchbox and had no attendants with her. "Chichio." She looked at me, a hint of nervousness and eagerness in her eyes. I went to your shop and bought a box of spring slumber incense. Today is Qingming festival, could I join you in paying our respects to Mrs. Qing? I was taken aback for a moment. She's the one who raised you to be so well-mannered and resilient, Mrs. Yan said, her eyes reddening. I was so foolish back then. I always thought blood ties were more important than anything else, but I forgot that the 16 years she spent raising you are your true roots. I want to go light a stick of incense for her, on behalf of myself, to thank her and to apologize. As I looked at my birth mother standing before me, who had completely set aside her prejudices and humbled herself, the tension that had been building up inside me for so long finally began to ease. "Let's go," I said casually, opening my oil paper umbrella. A light rain fell on the umbrella, making a crisp sound. I turned my head and saw Guju standing under the eaves of a street stall, holding a windproof lantern. He looked at me with a warm smile, waiting to walk with me. I smiled back and strode toward him. After 2 lifetimes of ups and downs, I have finally broken free from the quagmire of fate. I have not become anyone's vassal, nor have I lost myself in the pretense of family ties. I clasped the hand Guju extended to me, and the spring breeze felt incredibly refreshing. The road ahead is wide open, with boundless skies and vast seas, and it's all up to me, Lin Jiqiu, to decide. Side story. On a late autumn afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window lattice onto the rosewood counter at the Wanxiang shop, dispelling some of the chill. With a soft click, the last abacus bead fell into place. The principal is 1,500 taels, plus 2 years interest, for a total of 2,220 taels. Manager Lin, please count it. The speaker stood outside the counter, wearing a smart, autumn-scented Hangzhou silk blouse with narrow sleeves, her hair pinned up with a simple silver hairpin. Gone were the elaborate, cumbersome hair ornaments of the past, as well as the look of grievance that had so often brought tears to her eyes. It was Yan Wan. I took the stack of banknotes she handed me and examined them carefully. As she handed them over, I caught a glimpse of her hands. Those 10 fingers, once pampered and painted with red nail polish, now had a thin layer of calluses on their pads, marks left by day after day of poring over ledgers and running her fingers over various coarse fabrics to compare them. The numbers add up. I put the silver notes back in the box, pulled out the IOU, the one she'd signed with her fingerprint all those years ago, from the secret compartment, and, right in front of her, tore it cleanly in half. All done. I pushed the shredded paper toward her. Yan Wan looked at the 2 scraps of paper and let out a long breath, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Contrary to what I had expected, she didn't rush to leave. Instead, she pulled out a round stool from in front of the counter, sat down without hesitation, and poured herself a cup of plain tea. For the past 2 years, this has been the first thing on my mind every morning. To save on labor costs, I've personally traveled to Jiangnan to haggle with silk merchants, and I've stayed in the embroidery workshop until midnight, watching the embroiderers rush to finish their work. There were several times when I was so exhausted I wanted to jump into the moat, but whenever I thought of your words back then, "Turn left when you leave the house," I held my breath and pushed through. Yan Wan took a big sip of tea, her tone as calm as if she were recounting someone else's story. She raised her eyes and met my gaze openly. Lin Jiqiu, I used to think you'd taken my place. I tried so hard to act vulnerable and vie for favor, afraid of being cast out by the Yen family. Looking back now, I realize how ridiculous I was back then. Anything you gain by currying favor with others will never be a source of true confidence. Hearing her say that, I actually found myself feeling a surprising sense of admiration. To have struggled through the quagmire of debt for 2 years without being crushed, and instead to have developed such resilience, well, Yanwan isn't entirely beyond hope after all. It feels good to spend money you've earned yourself, doesn't it? I smiled faintly and pushed a plate of osmanthus cakes, which I just picked up from Yiping Zhai, toward her. It feels so reassuring, Yanwan said as she picked up a pastry and took a bite. Even if the Yen family were to go bankrupt tomorrow, with the knowledge of the silk trade I've gained over the past 2 years, I'd still be able to support myself. Just as they were speaking, the cloth curtain outside the shop was pulled aside, and Yanjing strode in. He was dressed in a neat, navy blue long robe. Gone was the ostentatious pomp of the young master of yesteryear, and he was accompanied only by a young servant carrying goods. Wanner, I knew you'd be here. Yanjing walked over, glanced at the shredded IOU on the table, and his tense expression instantly relaxed. He turned to look at me, his demeanor much more relaxed. Jiqiu, a few days ago you sent word that you needed a batch of moisture-resistant fine cotton cloth to wrap spices. I selected the best batch from the warehouse and had it delivered to you. I'm charging market price, I'm not taking advantage of you. All right, let Uncle Chen go to the backyard to count the goods and settle the bill. I nodded. I didn't refuse. Keeping things strictly business has always been the unspoken understanding between us these days. Yanjing sat down next to Yanwan, casually grabbed a piece of osmanthus cake and popped it into his mouth, saying indistinctly, "You've finally paid off that debt. Big Brother's treating us tonight, let's go to the Eight Immortals Pavilion for a nice meal to celebrate your escape from that hellish situation." "Sure, I'll have the most expensive 8-treasure duck, I'm going to eat you into the ground." Yanwan shot him a glance but smiled brightly. Watching the brother and sister bicker so casually, I was momentarily dazed. Without the hysterical moral coercion, without the fearful pretense, and freed from the heavy shackles of the real and fake heiresses and family honor, the relationships among the 5 of us had, paradoxically, reached an unprecedented level of ease and authenticity. We don't need to be the best of friends, nor do we need to cut all ties until the end of our days. Simply being acquaintances in this vast capital, people who occasionally do business together and can sit down for a cup of tea in peace, is already the best possible outcome. Want to come along? Yanjing suddenly turned around and asked me. There was none of his former insistence in his eyes, just a casual invitation. I watched as Guju walked toward me from the doorway, carrying a lunchbox, and shook my head with a smile. No, thanks. My husband brought back a roast goose from West Street, and I haven't finished balancing Wanxian's accounts yet. Yanjing followed my gaze, smiled, and nodded, saying nothing more. The brother and sister stood up to take their leave and walked side by side down the late autumn street. The sunlight fell on their backs, radiating a lightness that came from having survived the ordeal. Guju walked into the shop, set the steaming roast goose on the table, and glanced outside the door, following my line of sight. "What are you looking at?" he asked with a smile, pinching my cheek. "Let's settle an old score once and for all." I turned my head and met his loving gaze, feeling that the fragrance filling the room had never been so soothing as it was at that very moment. The end.